of global Africa, a potent force to respond to the challenges of the global economy, to unlock the prosperity we seek, to harness our resources and invest in instruments for our development. Together, we are stronger. Afrexim Bank, the Global Africa Bank.
So I'll invite my panelists to join me, Mr. Absi Sanu, who's the CEO of the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, Mr. Floyd Haynes, CEO New Haven Merchant Bank, Guyana, Ms. Marlene Ngowi, CEO of FEDA, Ms. Neka Onyali Ikpe, CEO of Fidelity Bank, Mr. Haytham El-Mayergi, Executive Vice President of the Global Trade Bank here at Afrexim Bank, and Mr. Simon Chiemtore, Chairman of CEO Lilium Capital. Chairman and CEO. You can sit next to me. Thank you. Marlene. So, Mr. Sanu, I'd like to come to you. Ultimately, what we saw as well during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, during the COVID crisis, a lot of international banks pulled out, and a lot of international banks removed, ultimately, correspondent banking services, which means that there was a massive gap on that front. And Ethiopia, I believe, was also cut off from the markets a couple of years ago in terms of correspondent banking. So what was the role of Afrexim Bank and other DFIs on the continent to provide that correspondent banking, and how important was it to a bank such as yours?
Thank you very much for raising this question. I thank Afrexim Bank also to give us this opportunity and to explain ourselves. As you, maybe some of you well know, Ethiopia was a little bit disconnected in financial institutions regardless, because we don't have international banks in Ethiopia, but we do have correspondent banking relationship with well-known Western banks. We thought that we have controlled financial operations in Ethiopia, but unfortunately, we later learned that our correspondent banking relationship was dependent on them. So for any international payments, for imports and exports, the relationship we had with them was at risk. And then when they didn't want to serve us, they just pulled out, as you have said. And we, in the previous times, we were not much asked for confirmed LCs, and even though the correspondent banks were there, we didn't know much about their importance. But once they pulled out, the requirement for confirmed LCs went high. So it added insult to injury, because they already pulled up the correspondent banks that we have been working with almost 7 decades. And at the same time, the suppliers, our strategic commodity suppliers, started to ask for confirmed LCs. So we suffered a lot. Before that, we didn't have a strong relationship with our regional banks, the African banks like Afrexim Bank, TD Bank, and of course the Standard Bank of South Africa. But later on, we have learned that these banks were very important and instrumental for our business, and our correspondent relationship with them significantly increased since COVID. Now, the last 4 years, all our fuel imports and fertilizer imports are being confirmed by these banks, and the role of Afrexim Bank is also, I think it is the second runner-up on our correspondent banking relationship, which was nothing before 5 years, but now we have huge exposure with Afrexim Bank.
Okay, fantastic. So, and I think, the title of this session is Pathways to Self-Determination, and unless we own our own capital ultimately, and unless we can offer these services, then we'll be stranded. Mr. Sanu, if you come back to you again, in terms of, Ethiopia's done very well in terms of developing its own industrial parks, special economic zones, textile and garments, for example. So what's been the role of government and the role of banks to make this happen?
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, the Ethiopian economy is predominantly government-led for very long years. So due to this fact, the private sector development was a little bit at low level. The role of government is still very significant. That's why basically many of the industrial parks are being built by the government for the first time. But now, private sector has started building their own industrial parks. So the concept of industrial parks has helped the country a lot, because we have limitations on infrastructure and several support mechanisms where if private sector builds the factories at different locations, providing the necessary infrastructure was hard and expensive. So pulling it together helped in several ways, basically on infrastructure service provision, but above all on sharing experiences and other knowledge base and making easy to support from the government side as well. And for the financial sector as well, when we visit them and try to support them, it is very much easy. We can find many industries at the same location. We can also provide banking services over there than specialized banking services for the sector. So the industrial parks have supported the country a lot. So the role of government is really providing appropriate policy for enabling this environment and providing the necessary resources, particularly the land, and of course facilitating the infrastructure like the roads, power basically, which are provided by the government. So the role of the government on this area is instrumental, and the financial sector, of course, for financing is key. And so in that particular case, Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, my bank, has a leading role in the area.
And what can we expect in Ethiopia over the next couple of years? You're opening up your market, so you're developing a capital market, you open up telecoms, and you're going to open up financial services.
Definitely, the opening up of financial services is in the making. Several directives are being issued by the central bank at the moment, and the new banking law is drafted and being presented to the government for approval. So Ethiopia is going to be very much open, and the market is going to be competitive, and we expect will be more connected to the whole world and in general, and particularly Africa. Africa is unfortunately disconnected because many of our businesses are laid by the colonial borders and the colonial trade routes, and still we are following the destinations that the colonials has devised for us, and we didn't change it so far. That's why Africa is not really connected. In this regard, we need to do a lot. Many of it being talked in the last 2 days, and today we are on the third day. People are saying that we have talked a lot. Probably I have special concern around the communication so far. I understand the desperation of the speakers who are saying we now have to be on action than the talk. But for me, the talk and the actions are not in opposite terms. They are very much related. We have to talk a lot. We didn't talk enough. We didn't communicate enough. I understand the desperation of the speakers. We have to act. We have to equally act and talk. People don't know. We are not aware of where we are. Basically, all our education, information, all we have are creating our generations to depend on the Westerns, to celebrate the Westerns. Our students, our babies know that the Westerns are good, and we are telling them that Africa is backward. That's how we are educating, because the education material, every available thing is supporting the Western. So skilled labor is going out. We don't have anything that celebrates or that promotes Africa. So this kind of forum where we have to tell our people, probably this circle of people might be aware a little bit better than others, but there are many people who do not know what we are doing today. So communication is still very much important. Yes, equally, we need to act what we are talking here, but we should not downplay the communication, the talk. It is important.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think that's what the Africa Trade Gateway is trying to do, is trying to correct that information asymmetry that exists. But Simon, is Ethiopia on the radar of the 25 countries by 2025?
Omar, I know you asked that question because you mentioned Ethiopia opening up the banking system. Absolutely, I mean, it's one of the biggest economies in Africa. So you cannot neglect Ethiopia as we expand. Obviously, we want to be everywhere in Africa potentially, as I mentioned, acting as a trade finance intermediary. It's a fantastic news that Ethiopia is now opening up their financial market to other African banks potentially to come and play. As he mentioned, it will connect Ethiopia more to the rest of the continent. So absolutely, it's on the map for us.
Fantastic. On that note, it's keeping you between lunch and this panel. So thank you. A round of applause to our panelists. Thank you for your insights. And the transformation is taking place, so let's continue fighting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar Ben Yedder there, moderating. Happy birthday, Omar.